Margaret Brennan, responsible for it. Been following both of these men over the years, and good enough to join us now. And Margaret, first to that moment yesterday, just apolitically, it was a beautiful snapshot of friendship, to be sure. But for those perhaps cynical among us, just how much
in
of
Washington?
I know, dare you say, how much of a surprise was it?
It was absolutely a surprise. It was a very, very small group of aides who planned this with the president himself. So the press was told sort of midday, expect something, but we had no idea. And the vice president actually said he thought he was just going to sort of a toast, a celebration to the past 8 years that they've worked together. He had no idea, and you saw that shock on his face as the president made that announcement. Not only did he get the Presidential Medal of Freedom, but also with distinction, a very, very rare honor. And
we saw watery eyes, just as we in fact saw from the president when he did address the thousands in Chicago just a couple of nights ago. But for a VP who wears his heart on his sleeve, it was quite a moment. There's, Margaret, as you mentioned in your piece, is a bond forged as only perhaps in a way as might be forged by profound tragedy. How close have these two, not are they, but how close have they grown over these 8 years?
Well, Joe Biden and what the public knows about his own personal suffering, first with that horrible car accident that took the life of his then wife and child, then now while in office having lost his adult son, Beau, to cancer, his pain has really been very public. That's something that the public has really embraced him with. You know, there was all that speculation that he himself would run for president. That death of his son, he says, was a factor in his own decision not to run, but it was something that, because of that personal side of himself, he's shown the public has really won over a lot of support for himself. But when it comes to this kind of relationship in office, President Obama has said, Joe Biden has said, things really took that personal turn with Beau Biden himself and his sickness. But what we know is there was also, if you want to be cynical, as you said, Josh, if you want to look at past vice presidential relationships, one thing that often in some ways widens any kind of divide, if there had been one at all, between a vice president and the president, is when that vice president makes a decision to try to succeed his boss in office. And that's usually politically expedient, depending on the popularity level of the president, the sitting president. That maybe the vice president, say Al Gore and Bill Clinton, had been close, and then Al Gore distance himself quite deliberately from Bill Clinton's scandals. You saw with George Bush and Dick Cheney over 8 years, their relationship really changed as they became more different in their strategic positions on key issues. So for Biden and Obama to end on this note of unity and in fact saying we've actually gotten closer instead of farther apart is pretty remarkable. Quickly, I was struck in your piece as well to learn that these two men do in fact spend 5 to 7 hours a day together. If only then perhaps as it might lend itself to the vice president's legacy, how to remember him. Well, if you ask Joe Biden, he would certainly point to his decades on Capitol Hill, that experience there, and his record on defending women's rights is something he's very proud of. I would say, and many aides around him would say, he is still trying to define his legacy, particularly when it comes to that fight against cancer. It's something he plans to continue to do. He spearheaded the so-called moonshot initiative that the president launched to honor Beau Biden, and he plans to continue to work with medical researchers after he leaves office to try to build that out and build on what they have accomplished so far. But when it comes to what Joe Biden has provided for Barack Obama, there's a big support he's given on foreign policy. In many ways, some say he's outsourced foreign policy to Joe Biden. When it comes to the issue of Ukraine, you're going to see Joe Biden, with just days left in office, get on a plane this week and fly to Kyiv, Ukraine, to try to help bolster that government there as it tries to push back against Russian interference. That's been something that Joe Biden has been key on. He's actually also really been key in advising on the wars in Iraq and Afghanistan and the migrant crisis on the southern border of the U.S., really pushing Mexico to try to police its own borders. I know perhaps there was bias there, but as we heard the president say yesterday, he's the greatest vice president in history, certainly proving, if nothing else, that if you want to surprise a very public figure,
and get a peak reaction, Joe Biden's your man, to be sure. Margaret Brennan there, we do thank you for the piece and for your time.